So this is one of those patron questions which when it comes in you sit there and go, well, this could have differences, this could cause differences, because, let's be honest, taking fortified islands, if they're being in any way competently held, is very, very difficult. Malta, Gibraltar are good examples of them. So Crete, well, it's bigger. It's bigger than both, but it's going to depend on what's happened, isn't it? It's going to depend a lot on what was put into it. And so today, we are doing this patron premiere of Alternate History. What happens if Greece fortifies Crete? What happens if they do? And it's a question which was proposed originally by Dankadramas. And yeah, it's an interesting one to think about. It is an interesting one to think about. If we put it into the situation of Greece, because Greece has an interesting duality going on in its government, and whilst honestly Alexandros Kiosis, who was the governor of Bank of Greece, who then succeeded Metaxas as prime minister, was not as powerful while Metaxas was there. Metaxas is an interesting prime minister in that he is totalitarian, definitively fascistic inspired, but not part of the fascistic club. He's not. There are reasons for this. He has a good, okay working relationship with Germany, and he has something going on with Spain, but Italy is a big problem for him. And that means he's never part of the fascistic club. He's never really in that grouping, and this means he actually has a close relationship with Britain. They have an ongoing close relationship with Britain. But Greece also does a lot of fortification work from about 1936 onwards. They do a lot of fortification work. And they do look at fortifying the islands. They decide not to. They fortify mainly their northern border and their border areas because they expect more of a land attack than they do a sea attack. But there are options there. The fact is, it's something that's considered. There is something that's considered. And there's a lot of interesting work with various British companies because, well, Crete has a lot of interesting things to invest in. They have quite a large source of lignite. They have quite a large source of gypsum. Iron ore is fairly common there. Marble, especially Damascus grey marble. And there are even potential for offshore hydrocarbons, although that's something which we didn't really find about till after World War II. So that's not really a factor in our thinking in this period. But realistically, Crete has a lot of reasons to invest in it. Crete has a lot of reasons to develop. Now, the thing is, if you are going to invest in Crete, if you are going to grow it, it's going to take longer than 36 to 41. It's going to have to start earlier. And there's going to have to be things done. The first thing is going to be railways. Now, this always interests me because the amount of people go turn around and go, well, you don't have railways on Crete. There was actually a railway on Crete. There is. Actually, a narrow gauge railway was established in Heraklion from Geophros in the west side of the city to the port. That was it. It was established during the 1930s. The thing is, though, if you'd started off earlier, if you'd used the model of Pelion of the Festiniog, you'd gone with fairly style, narrow gauge locomotives, these double locomotives, then they make sense. And especially when you consider the mining industry, which is potentially there in Crete, and you consider the other scenarios there, the fact that in the 1920s and 30s, in this period, the cars, lorries aren't what they've become. The road network that serves Crete is not able to deal with heavy industry. So if you're going to invest in Crete, if you're going to grow Crete, the first thing you have to do in this period is build a railway. And after World War One, you have a huge amount of stock, a huge amount of this pre-built line sitting around. So you could have built a bigger railway. You could have quite easily. It would probably start on the northern side and then spread to the southern side, west and east, and go round the island, go round. Probably end up with doing a full circuit of a couple of lines across the middle, those sort of things. But that would be a massive boost to the Cretan economy. A massive boost to it. And the thing is, I keep coming up mentioning this, but I'm going to mention it more. Lignite. Okay, it's not the greatest coal in the world. It really isn't. In fact, it's terrible coal. But with the fact that they have their own indigenous sources of lignite and wood, and they have the potential for destruction of other hydrocarbons and other things there, but, they mainly are, we're talking marble, we're talking iron, we're talking gypsum, we're talking all sorts of things that could be extracted from Crete. There are reasons to build this, and if you do have a disruption in coal supply, you do have some domestic coal to power them, and wood, of course. That's one of the reasons why you go with a fairly style trains, because A, they can more easily deal with hills and mountain or rocky terrain. They're really quite good at that, and they can pull an enormous load for their size. And there's a great advantage to it in the space. We're talking about a 1 foot 11 inch to 2 foot gauge railway, narrow gauge line, being built around the island. So again, not a massive line. Now again, the difference is if you have this all built, if you have such a much larger railway network, a much greater rolling stock, you're going to have greater facilities there in terms of the plant and the maintenance facilities for the engines. You're going to have a locomotive shed, at least a locomotive shed with heavy cranes in it, which is going to have an added benefit of when you have tanks brought over, Matilda tanks, remember, and they need some severe maintenance, you're A, going to have the ability to move parts around from where they are, and maybe broken tanks around from where they are to where they need to be, thanks to the railway, and B, you're going to actually have a space where you can have the cranes and facilities to lift them up and do full work on them. Railway maintenance sheds and railway locomotive sheds are absolutely excellent places for tank maintenance in this time period. They have pretty much all the facilities you need. And the thing is, if you have working tanks, that gives you an advantage in defence. But it's not only working tanks that would give you an advantage of. It gives you the advantage to move a lot more concrete around the island. We'll be talking about that as we go through this and talk about other defensive lines. You also, of course, have the advantage of having the potential of armoured trains going around with machine guns on them and other systems to engage any troops which land on the island. Pretty much having a railway invested in is going to be the best baseline you can give to the island for increasing its safety, increasing its prosperity, and increasing your ability to defend that. To defend it all. And that's going to be a big thing. Now, I really do have to emphasise that one of the advantages you have with Crete is once you start building railways seriously, you are going to grow it round the island. Because a lot of the mine is going to be in the southern part of Crete. A lot of the major ports are in the northern part of Crete. Some of the stuff you want to get out is in the western of Crete, but you want to bring it to east. So you're going to end up with railways going around the islands, other ports in the south, etc. you might want to exploit, and other facilities you're going to need to think about. And this means that you probably end up with not just a railway running around, but also distributed railway infrastructure around the island. They probably will have a main maintenance shed, but they probably have other facilities where they can do some light maintenance. And all this infrastructure is dual-use infrastructure. It will have its peacetime usage and its wartime usage, but it's also going to improve the quality of life of the residents. In the 1920s and 30s, having a railway like this is going to boost up the Cretan economy and boost up the options for people in how they develop and, to an extent, exploit the advantages Crete does have. Because Crete does have great agriculture. Crete does have great fishing. Add in a little bit of mining, add in railways, they can boost themselves and grow themselves in their capabilities of how they efficiently produce and support themselves and how they improve themselves. And that then leads us to the airfields. And then building proper airfields. Well, again, if you have railways and ports already running around, then when you're building the airfields, you can get far more stuff into them. You could build proper concrete airfields if you really wanted to. Now, the first concrete airfields were actually built in 1916. And it was something which was becoming increasingly common in the 1920s. So again, if you have the resources and you have the infrastructure already in place, if you have the railway and you build that post-World War I, then when you're coming around to developing the airfields and developing these things, you're going to be able to put them in more properly. And you're going to put them in more properly. And that's going to make it far better for using heavier aircraft, and it's going to make you part of more of it's going to be more easy to lift and things in and out by air, and personnel in and out by air. Now you might think, well, hang on, Alex, doesn't that mean it's going to give an advantage to the attackers? Yes, but also it will give an advantage to the defenders, because it's more viable to operate aircraft from there. And who knows what might be moved there to support operations not just happening in North Africa, but also happening in Greece. It's a nicest way. If you've got Crete set up with those facilities and can take long-range aircraft on them, then if I'm the commander of British forces in North Africa and I want to support Greece like I'm being instructed to, but I also want to have the things on call to assist me, then any of my heavy or medium aircraft, etc., that I am having to move to Greece gets moved to Crete. I move it to Crete. Because there's the big airfield to support them, and it's far easier for me to get fuel there, and all sorts of things can be set up. And it's far easier to secure. It's safe from German attacks and allows us to support the forces in both the north and coast of the Mediterranean, i.e. Greece, and the southern coast of the Mediterranean, North Africa. It becomes a useful thing to do. Now, at this point, there are roughly 3 airfields on the island that are realistically Melem, Cristel, and what's today called Heralcon, but has other names. They're roughly the 3. They are roughly the 3. And again, if you might still have all 3, you might have gone, well, with concrete, we'll build a very good, solid, single one. It's going to, as again, especially if you have a railway running around the island, it becomes more tempting to build one decent decent airfield, which again could make things a lot easier to defend. I wouldn't be surprised myself if that was you had more likely a single airfield in the middle of, in terms of a proper airfield, and the other ones, if they do exist, are little light flying areas. In which case, they are probably facilities which, in the wartime, get wire strung across them and get told, stop using them, everyone concentrate on this main field. Which means defending it becomes a lot easier. Because you concentrate your forces around one spot. Instead of trying to defend 3 or 4, you just concentrate them around defending 1. And that also makes it easier to command and control. It makes it easier for you to have people there who are going to take decisions and going to do what needs to be done, and have the logistics and support and sustain the force as well, because you can have a larger dump to support the personnel who are all around there. There are advantages to this. There are advantages. And then is building the coastal fortifications. So the thing is, once you start putting in some infrastructure and start putting in some investment into Crete, you suddenly make it a more viable place to build defences in, and B, a place you need to defend more. It's the catch-22 of investment. The more you invest, the more you need to have as insurance. Because if things go wrong, you are more exposed. So, the thing is, between 1936 and 1941, the Greeks do a huge amount of investment in building a line of fortifications called the Metaxas line. Yes, he's a totalitarian dictator. He's going to name things after himself. Yeah, he calls himself a prime minister. Yes, there's a monarch above him and all those things. But nice way, yeah, he's still going to name things after himself. He's very pro-Greek. Not very nice if you disagree with him, but yeah, it's the governments you have at that time. And they do build some coastal fortifications alongside the Metaxas line. They do build some. Now, things which were favoured for the line were 75mm guns, Nice large concrete positions underground, and bunkers, and lots of bunkers they like to build. And lots of machine guns, lots of, the typical things you use for fortifications. Now, the reality is, if the Greeks do start investing in this stuff into Crete, you would make it an absolute nightmare for airborne troops to take. It was bad enough for the airborne in the Netherlands and, let's be honest, Norway. In terms, by the time they've been mauled sufficiently and they're going to Crete, where they're going to be facing the fact that the Royal Navy managed to knock out 2 out of 3 of their amphibious resupply forces. It's only the Italians which get through in the end, the third one. They've got built-in heavier air defences, mortars, machine guns, all in actually pre-built positions, not in temporary positions. And if there's have been fortifications, where are they going to be around? They're going to be around the major ports, and they're going to be around the major airfield. If you're building them in this area to defend Crete, that's what you're going to defend. You're going to defend the ports, you're going to defend the airfield. And oh, by the way, now you want to put in a load of concrete, you want to put in these defences, oh, we've got a railway to do it. It's going to be nice and easy. We've got an airport to fly in engineers and fly in people we need to do. We've got the port facilities. We've got the railway to move the concrete round. And honestly, the thing is, it could get a lot worse than this for the Germans when we're talking about Crete. We're talking about it as an option, as something which you can invest in, which you can build up. Because the Metaxas line, okay, yes, some of the forts hold for just a few days, but they do hold for a few days. And they provide the Greeks with the time they need to counterattack, to reorganize themselves. And that's the thing, again, if you're taking an island like Crete, you can't afford to be held up for a couple of days. If you can't take the airfield for 3-4 days and start flying in resupply using into the airfields, you are snookered. Especially with those first 2 amphibious forces getting stopped. You're snookered if they stop the planes coming in, if the planes aren't able to come flying in. Think about it. Having some concrete bunkers with machine guns in them around the airfield, that's not going to be a nice airfield to try and land and take. It's not going to require much effort on the Allied side to hold it. It's not. So, with that being said, though, things can get even worse, because historically, only Lemnos had her gun removes, and turned it into a coastal defense battery in Aegina, which is lovely, and Kilkiss is made into a gunnery training ship, which is also quite nice. But you sit there and go, if we have to defend Crete as well, might both these vessels be done? In which case, you can end up with as many as 4 12-inch guns, 8 8-inch guns, 8 7-inch guns, and 12 3-inch guns being added to the Crete defences. Think about that again. 4 12-inch guns, 8 8-inch guns, 8 7-inch guns, and 12 3-inch guns for Crete. Let's say you turn them into batteries of pairs of guns. You have 2 12-inch guns, 2 12-inch batteries sitting around Crete. Probably positioned to defend the major harbours. You have 4 8-inch guns. They're going to be positioned to defend the other harbours. And 4 7-inch gun batteries. That's useful. Plus a whole load of 3-inch guns. You already like 3-inch guns, but you could be adding more. All over the place. The thing is, when we consider Crete as an island, when we consider it as a defensive position, mainly you're going to be attacking from the north if you're trying to land and take it. You don't want to be attacking into the mountain range. You don't want to be attacking against the south. But if you've got these prepared positions, because for every one of these gun positions, there's going to be multiple machine gun positions, or 20mm AA cannon positions, or mortar positions to support them and provide defense against them. Now, yes, providing the garrison for it could be interesting, but that's not really the problem when it comes to the invasion of Crete. The British have and the Allied forces there are 30,000 troops. It's not going to be a problem finding the numbers of personnel, the people to man the machine gun positions and provide the infantry around these fortifications, that are going to turn them into absolutely deadly pieces of engineering. And the thing is, if you've got 12-inch shore batteries and 8-inch guns and 7-inch guns, suddenly any of your amphibious operations, even the Italian one, starts to look risky. You're going to need to come heavy if you're doing it. You cannot come in a light manner. You cannot come, oh, we're going to try a few destroyers or a couple of merchant ships. You have to bring a lot of firepower with you because you've got to silence those guns. Yes, they are old 12-inch guns. 12-inch 45s to be precise. But you still have to silence them. You still have to silence them. They can reach out as far as 30,000 yards at 47 degrees of elevation, which is their standard coastal artillery form. And let's be honest, if you raise them up high enough, which you can do in Crete, because Crete has some very nice elevations and positions, they could reach out and touch you a long way away. And that's going to have an impact. That is going to have an impact. Now, there is another reason for doing this, by the way, because if you consider the guns from Lemnos, they go to the island of Aegina, where they defend the approaches to the port of Athens. And so if you have decided Crete is going to be your backup redoubt, is going to be where you're investing defense and how you're securing access into the Mediterranean Aegean, it's very sensible that these also get the similar guns. And it's going to be something that everyone's going to have to factor into their planning. Because if you've got 12-inch guns, if you've got the 8-inch guns, you've got the 7-inch guns, you've got all these batteries of guns sitting on this island, it's suddenly a far tougher nut to crack. A far tougher nut to crack. It's also, probably if you're doing this, you're going to have invested in it to an extent as a basing facility for your navy, i.e. the Katsunis and the Protest class. So you've probably set up the base for them on this island. Again, if you've got the infrastructure, if you've got the railway there, you've got decided to fortify it, it's sensible to base your submarines there. And suddenly this has become a defensive hub for the Greeks in their territory. Crete has become their redoubt for supporting operations in the Ionian Sea, the Aegean Sea, and the Adriatic. And again, it makes sense because, as I already mentioned, as you invest in a place, it becomes more valuable, so you invest more to defend it, which makes it more valuable. In turn, you start seeking efficiencies from this and go, well, hang on, Crete, where it's positioned located, that's an excellent submarine position for them to go either way. That's an excellent position for forces to move up either way, for aircraft to move up from either way, and that's why you invest more in it. So you end up with a bit of a virtuous circle, but you also end up with Greece having a sort of a hard shell in terms of their northern fortifications of the Metaxas line, and having this other defensive point down to their south, Crete, which is critical to their overall security and sort of to act as a backstop to that defensive line. A position which supports to the coastal regions on either side, and means that, okay, realistically, if you want to try and attack either side of Greece, you have to get past the land defences, or you have to knock out Crete. Makes it more important, but also makes it more interesting. With that being said, Shameless book plug time. And yeah, this video has been sort of unusual for What If History in that I've had to start off the What If rather early. Basically, and I hope I've explained the reason why it hasn't got all this stuff, is because there wasn't investment. Basically, if the railways had been built, and that's the pre-assessment, if the railways had been built, and if they'd gone ahead with the plan post-World War I in building the railways and building narrow gauge railways in Crete, using those resources available, I think this is where you end up going, because of the, how do I put this, the way you start structuring investment. But this is the point. To make this justify, I have to go back quite a long way. And I have to change not a lot of history, realistically. You can see everyone going along this way. And also, once you've started investment, it becomes sort of like a virtuous circle. We're going to build an airfield. Might as well make a concrete one anyway. It's going to be more expensive, but you've got the facilities to bring it in. And you can build a better system that way. And that helps. That helps. And to me, that also provides a good example for modern day in thinking and how we approach things, because if you invest in stuff, you've got to be prepared that A, it's going to attract more investment, but also you're going to need to defend what is being invested in. You're going to need to think about it. Anyway, Shane's book plug, where I use for saying thank you for people, for liking, sharing, subscribing, supporting the channel, helping grow, where I point out my book. There are more coming, but this one's the only one that's out currently. And I say thank you, basically. Thank you for making this possible. Thank you for supporting this channel, because none of it would be possible without it. None of it possible without your support. So thank you. You're what makes everything possible. Patreon questions like this are always fun things to do, because because it's thanks to them and thanks to people who watch the channel, and our members and super chats and all those things, that I can afford to buy the books and things which I need to do for my research. So thank you. Now the thing is, when we start considering the historic attack on Crete and how it works, it's basically a classic example of overloading your opponent at key points, and your opponent already, to an extent, feeling exposed, spread out, and not really sure how they're handling things. And it's been something which has been made worse by repeated changes in high command. The British have repeatedly changed command, and every single officer who's been in charge has suddenly had a new idea of how they're going to defend the island, and has changed things around, and has wanted to implement. This has left the forces which were there confused. They are battered from fighting in Greece, and they are confused. And most of those changes come down to Winston Churchill wanting someone of appropriate seniority and army in charge. Now the thing is, the historic attack plays out and does well because of the breakdown in command structure, the breakdown in leadership, and the general issues the British are having. Basically, in many regards, Crete is a pre-runner of Malaya. It really is. It's the British Armed Forces in this period, and when I say British, I mean the British and Commonwealth Armed Forces operating, in terms of the individuals and fighting of the individual units, very, very well. But the problems you can get in the British Armed Forces, British and Commonwealth Armed Forces, in terms of their command structure and how they work together, all the worst parts of it come out. All the problems you can have in it come out, and all the issues come out. And realistically, this attack shouldn't have worked. It shouldn't have succeeded apart from what happens with the British forces, with the forces deployed there. Because once you start expanding this out, you realise very quickly that about 7,000 of the seaborne personnel don't make it, and that while even if we discount the Mobile Naval Basing Defence Organisation personnel, even if we discount them, then theoretically there are 38,000 to 39,000 troops on this island, and the Germans and German parachute mounted troops managed to get roughly 15,000 troops there. So theoretically, you could argue it is, how do I put this politely, 5-2 advantage on the Allies. Plus, despite what they'd believe, the Cretan population do not turn out to be very friendly or supportive of the Germans, greeting them as liberators when they arrive. They really don't. It's amazing. I know, the Germans always think everyone's going to be so glad to be liberated by them to become part of the German area. I don't know what it is. Anyway, so realistically, this should not have succeeded. It should not have succeeded, and the strengths on the 20th of May and how things happen are interesting. If you have a more coordinated force, if you have a force which is more organised because it has to be, because there's pre-existing defensive positions they've had to slot into, both the Greek troops, there's 10,000 of them there, that's quite a hefty garrison, and if you've already got prepared fortifications, etc., that's probably where they're going in, and the British are probably providing extras around that. The Greek troops fight well. The Greek troops do fight well. At every point where the Greeks are fighting, they are very brave, very honourable to their allies, to their opponents. Let's put it this way. The Greeks, in their method of warfare, occasionally consider the Canadians to be their inspiration. And I say that because of the well-known fact of the Canadians have managed to cause to be written large chunks of the Geneva Convention. They're both honourable forces, just they tend to be, after what they've done, tends to end up being added into various lists of things not to do to people ever again, because it's giving us nightmares. So, if you have some pre-built defences, if you have all this stuff put in place, well, I don't think the historic attack would necessarily work. I don't think the Germans would do it that way. They might, and I'll be talking about why they might, but I think there would be some changes. I also would add in that it becomes very different to hold it. Again, if you only have one airfield, if you look at the way these forces are structured out, they are each defending an airfield. They have personnel defending each of these airfields. Well, if you have one airfield which is being concreted and the rest are all mainly light fields, which may or may not be, might be even smaller, and you have defences built around them. If they are actually an airfield, then honestly, as said, you've probably closed off those airfields. The easiest way to defend them would be, have we got aircraft and troops to defend them? Nope. Let's string wires across these airfields and let's put enough troops to defend those wires, so that people can't come up and cut them. Suddenly it becomes a very interesting position to hold, in that you're holding it requires, well, we've got a concrete fort which has some 3-inch guns and some machine gun positions, and we have a couple of companies of infantry in them. Oh, good. And if they're holding it, no one's cutting the wires on that field. Cute. Alright. That's sorted. And then you have the rest of your forces concentrated where you want them. Or maybe you have them deployed to send out. Again, if you have armoured trains as an option to run around the island, then if you need to, you can resupply your forces by armoured train. And yes, the Germans will probably try and damage the tracks, but A, you hopefully have some spare parts to repair them, and B, that's probably going to get them spotted by the Cretans, and that's never a good thing, because some of those old ladies, they did violent things to the poor Germans. It's not often I say poor Germans, but there are some stories that come out of Crete of what happened to some of the paratroopers, and it's not nice. Not saying I necessarily disagree with the old ladies defending their homes, but I also will wince on behalf of the Germans when I read the stories. So the thing is, that attack wouldn't necessarily work, and they wouldn't necessarily do that, because also the Allies wouldn't be deployed like that. Plus, if this is a forward submarine base, honestly, there's a goodly chance the British have deployed some of their submarines there as well, like Malta. Yes, they've got Malta as their operating base. Yes, they've got the very nice Alexandria. But if you can operate some submarines forward from Crete as well, let's consider if the Aegean suddenly becomes the Ionian, the Aegean suddenly become very, very fun, and the Adriatic definitely so. You're far closer, and because it's had the investment and infrastructure built into it, it's possible. Now here's the interesting thing. Kirch traditionally is looking at a target which, A, they for some reason expect to be greeted as liberators, B, is previously unfortified, C, has the logistics infrastructure of the, well, which hadn't improved much realistically since the Ottomans had ruled it. In fact, there's arguments it hadn't improved much since the Byzantine Empire, or rather the Roman Empire of the East, had ruled it. And therefore, comes up with a plan accordingly, according to fit with what was, and I always love this fact that Crete gets its own, Fura Directive. Fura Directive number 28. Operation Mercure, or Mercury. As a base for air warfare against Great Britain in the eastern Mediterranean, and we must prepare to occupy the island of Crete, Operation Mercure. For the purpose of planning, it will be assumed that the whole Greek mainland, including the Peloponnese, is in the hands of the Axis powers. To command this operation is entrusted to Commander-in-Chief Air Force, who will employ for the purpose primarily the airborne forces and air forces stationed in the Mediterranean area. 3. The Army, in cooperation with Commander-in-Chief Air Forces, will make available in Greece suitable reinforcements for the airborne troops, including a mixed armored detachment which can be moved to Crete by sea. 4. The Navy will take steps to ensure sea communications, which must be secured as soon as the occupation of the island begins, for protection of those communications, and as far as necessary, for the provision of troop ships. Commander-in-Chief Navy will make the necessary arrangements with the Italian Navy. All means will be employed to move the airborne troops and the 22nd Division, which is under the command of the Commander-in-Chief Air Force, to the assembly area which he will designate. The necessary space for freight lorries will be put at the disposal of the Chief of Armed Forces Transport by the High Command of the Army and Air Force. Those transport movements must not entail any delay in the mounting of Operation Barbarossa. For anti-aircraft protection in Greece and Crete, Commander-in-Chief Air Force may bring up anti-aircraft units of 12th Army. Commander-in-Chief Air Force and Commander-in-Chief Army will make necessary arrangements for their relief and replacement. After the occupation of the island, all or part of the airborne forces must be made ready for new tasks. Arrangements will therefore be made for replacement by army units. In preparing coastal offences, Commander-in-Chief Navy may, if necessary, draw upon guns captured by the Army. I request Commander-in-Chief to inform me of their plans, and Commander-in-Chief Air Force to inform me when his preparations will be completed. The order for the execution of the operation will be given by me only. Signed, Adolf Hitler. Now, Kirch is a very smart gentleman. And these are the plans, again, and the thing which sets them off for doing the invasion of Crete as it was. And they'll win, but they'll smash their own airborne forces doing it and never be able to launch another airborne operation. But I'd point out that, realistically, with the level of fortification we're talking about and having experienced the forts, this suddenly is going to become more of an amphibious operation. Yes, you're going to want to use the airborne forces, but it's going to become a far more joint operation with the Navy, with the Regia Marina, the Italian Navy, if anything. And that's a problem. One of the reasons why Malta never gets even attempted on is because of trying to organise those two groups to work together. Allies they may be, cooperative allies, no. No. And again, it's going to require more forces which could detract from Barbarossa. So it becomes a case of, do they actually even do it? My strong suspicion is no. My strong suspicion is that the Germans don't attempt Crete. Because if it's got the necessary fortifications, it's got the British troops in attendance, it's got the Greek garrison, it's got all these things, and it's got infrastructure, it's been built up. It's got fortifications, it's got 12-inch guns, it's got railways, it's got dug-in fortifications, command centres, telephone cables, and, all these things around it. Then it becomes that much more difficult. And if they are going to do it, they have to coordinate with the Italians. It would have to be a simultaneous operation of the Italians and the Germans. And Kurt Student would have to bring that together. It wouldn't just be the mountain warfare troops, the airborne troops. He'd have to be bringing a lot of the Italians with him. Because it'll be a major force. Because if you're going to deal with 12-inch guns, you're bringing your battleships. 12-inch guns dug in, you're bringing battleships. No matter what those 12-inch guns are, you're bringing your battleships. And the thing is, this is May 1941. It's after not only Taranto, but also Matapan. And whilst, yes, the Italians are still at sea, please note they are still at sea, there's going to be some very interesting battles coming up. The Royal Navy is not exactly weak, and in this scenario, if you're moving this much force together and coordinating this much force together, it's going to stick out. See, there's an old rule which actually is true. If you have one person going to do something, they can slip in places which a dozen can't. If you have a dozen going, they can slip in ways 100 can't. When you're starting to have to organise this much force, it's going to take longer. You are never going to get an invasion of Crete to take place by the 20th of May. It's going to be pushed well into June. If you're coordinating all these forces. Which is going to give the Allies more time to prepare, organise, get themselves dug in and happy. But also, you are going to find yourself giving the game away. Because you're taking transports up. That's going to be noticed. There are less transports moving around. Well, where are they being gathered? What ports are they in? What reconnaissance is picking up on? What's intelligence picking up on? What signals intelligence and signals traffic analysis bringing up? All these things are going to start revealing your plan of action and what you're going to do. Again, this is the added benefit of actually doing these kinds of fortification defenses, because it makes the task more difficult. It means the enemy has to gather more. Gathering more takes more time and also makes more noise, which makes it easier to see coming. But again, it would be probably a joint attack. It would probably... The Germans had planned to do an amphibious operation themselves. It's just both those amphibious assaults get beaten back by the Royal Navy. It's the Regia Marina, which on the third attempt managed to get through because they divert themselves because they're playing the naval game of cat and mouse with the Royal Navy at the time. I would also add that with the falling of Greece, the importance of Crete, both as a theoretical base for the Greek government to continue on fighting from, and therefore a hub for the free Greek forces, and its position in the Mediterranean, whereby between it and Malta it can provide a significant amount of support and significant amount of air power, especially if supplied with aircraft and supplies, to assist operations that you make the Eastern Mediterranean far easier for the Royal Navy to secure. Again, you give time, you give them reason to get involved and to put more effort in. And I could honestly see any German attack, any attack on Crete, actually devolving into a naval battle. Traditionally it's 13 days of fighting, 20th of May to the 1st of June. Well, if you're organising the Italians and you're getting them coordinated and you're bringing all this sufficient force together, I can't see you launching this attack before the 28th, 29th of May. Probably in the nicest way when it's not an emergency request to the Italians, but it's a pre-organised order where there's going to be arguing over who's in charge. I would say probably the 8th of June, not Junie. And I'm going to just say, I apologise for that. I'm having a mild war with Microsoft Copilot. I keep turning it off and trying to get it to go away, and keeps coming back and making improvements. And the thing is, it's I swear what they've done with Copilot is they've given Clippy the ability to actually do the things it was suggesting, which were always stupid anyway. But now it's got a Copilot, and it's just... Life is fun enough being a dyslexic historian without a system actively working against me. But leave that to one side. So, historically the battle comes in, and honestly, it's touch and go for a while. There's a whole debate, a recently open debate, as to whether or not, frankly, it's the amphibious assault of the Italians which finally finish off the ability of the Allies to resist. I would say it is, because I would say the logistics coming through by air are not that great. And as long as the British have controlled the sea, and they're not being challenged, and so they're able to use naval support as often as they want, etc., and various things, they have a goodly chance of still winning it. But there is the fact that, to be honest, some of the CEOs on the British Allied side are already withdrawing, and they've lost control of the airfields. So, yeah. But in this scenario, your amphibious operation has got to be far bigger and far earlier, and it's got to be part of the initial assault, and it's going to be seen. It's going to be seen coming, and I think there is an honest chance that you end up with a naval battle. There is an honest chance that whilst the parachutists are trying to land and seize fortified positions on the island, there is a naval battle going ahead with Cunningham and his battle line and whatever ships he can get out. The thing is, this naval battle might well involve Formidable, because again, if you're seeing the Germans doing the preparations they would be doing, and the Italians doing the preparations they'll be doing for such an operation, do you launch the Scarpento raid on the 26th of May? You might do, you might not. But if you don't launch it, then Formidable's going to be in a better position. You're probably going to have Queen Elizabeth and Valiant. You know, you're going to have a couple of modernised Queen Elizabeth class battleships. You're going to have a lot of cruisers, a lot of destroyers, a lot of submarines from the British side. And those land-based 12-inch guns as well. And whatever aircraft are based on Crete as well. Because if you see this coming, A, it gives you time to react and redeploy other forces. It does. But B, it also becomes tempting, because if you can turn Crete into a follow-on to Taranto and Matapan, so you then have a Battle of Crete naval battle where you can sufficiently damage enough of the Regia Marina, you have changed the war as far as the British are concerned in the Mediterranean and for the whole of World War II. So it becomes very incentivized for the Royal Navy to stick as much force as they can in that area. As much force as they can get. Is it going to be everything they want? No. But I have no doubt the Royal Air Force and other units, and British forces, including probably the Army, would see, hang on, if this is coming, any forces we get to Crete that are going to cause this force to be tied down and probably annihilated there is better. In fact, the Royal Navy might even hold their naval force back until the amphibious assault has started. They might not engage until the night when the amphibious forces are going in. They might even let them come in and be starting to land, all those things. Because if they're doing it as a planned operation, and Cunningham, if he's getting information, probably would be, because he gets all the intelligence gets sent to him, he's going to know that fighting at night is an advantage for the Royal Navy versus the Regia Marina. It is, because whilst there are some very skilled night operators in the Regia Marina, they're not listened to but anywhere near enough by their own high command, and there hasn't been enough training. And he's also going to think, well, we can annihilate them at night. And we can leave the defences to hold during the day. We can hold up positions during the day. We can use the defences at Crete itself to cause them trouble during the day when they're trying to attack. There again, they might hit them the night before they land, as they're in transit along the way. Spot them with aircraft, and then just track them. When they wake up in the morning, the Italian fleet's been heavily damaged. No ships left. None of their merchant ships, none of the troops left, and the air attack and the airborne forces, when they arrive, just meet a horde of machine guns and perhaps warships and their AA guns as well, sitting offshore, going, "Oh, junkers for me to shoot down." That scenario only works, though, if the Italians will help. Historically, they do. Historically, they do arrive on 20th May. Historically, they do bring these forces. Would they? When they can see this is what will happen. I think, in many ways, Mussolini would force them to do this, and I think it would be a very bad decision for them to do so. Doing it as an ad hoc thing, when the British are already committed and everyone's already dealing with things, is one thing. Delaying it, coordinating it, being part of this planned assault is going to give everyone time to see what's coming. And I'm not making claims that the British would suddenly have oodles and oodles of forces. They wouldn't. But if we consider what they do deploy for Crete, 21 destroyers, roughly 2 AA cruisers, 8 light cruisers, 2 battleships and a carrier, and that's just roughly some of the forces they're deploying just to support the Crete operations, not other operations they have ongoing and stuff they have sitting in the Red Sea, which they might call through for something which they can see coming. Which they will probably see coming because they'll probably have about a week or two's notice. So you can't draw forces from all over the world for that, but you can draw some forces in from the wider area. That's going to be a fairly hefty Royal Navy presence. And I think the Italians will also be putting whatever they have available into that force structure. Because again, if you're going to take on 12-inch guns, that's what you need to do. But, and this is the big but of this, the glutamus maximus of this whole question is, do I really think that Karl Student and the various high commands and the Regia Marina and Hitler and Mussolini would actually cooperate to this level to carry out an operation which, whilst not sea lion sized, is going to be incredibly complex and needs to be incredibly worked through as a joint operation, and are prepared to put all the resources necessary into it, which can only come from planning for Operation Barbarossa. I don't think so. I think even though this is going to mean that there is going to be 1,000 kilometers roughly between Polesti and an airbase which could host Lancaster bombers, I just don't think, forget it's in range of Wellington bombers, let alone mosquitoes, I don't think they'll do it, because it's going to be such a big operation to coordinate. It's going to take so much resources away from what they're otherwise doing. It will have a massive impact on North Africa campaign. It will mean that, frankly, you aren't sending convoys through this bit if you're the Axis. For the Allies, getting convoys to Malta now becomes a lot easier because you basically hug the North African coast, head to Malta, and you've got Crete to protect you one position and Malta itself. So the Malta convoys are going to be more regular ones, but they're going to come from Alexandria. They're going to have to go round Africa and come from the east and go back to the east. But I just think that whilst the Germans might want to, and in coordinating the German forces, the Italian forces, to carry out such an amphibious operation, such an assault as would be necessary. Because let's say you do go just a pure airborne assault. Let's say you go the same way with an airborne assault. You haven't got any forces coming rushing up. It's not like Netherlands. It's not other troops arriving within hours to support you. And those positions are going to be concrete, well held, firmly positioned, with lots of personnel alert, fully crewed, infantry around them. And for the troops who are defending, those are positions which they're going to feel safe in, they're going to feel secure in, they're going to feel like they are their spaces. I'm not going to feel exposed. And the thing is, if you also have a fortified to an extent as this, and you have the infrastructure there as you do to an extent as this, you're going to have planning, and you're going to have probably a Greek staff on the island who are going to have taken a significant amount of the lead in the operations. Yes, it's going to be an allied operation. Yes, the British and allied forces are probably going to be providing the bulk of the forces. But it's the seat of the Greek government. It's because they can go there, and that's what they can keep part of their government in Greece. It's the seat of. They've got a senior officers there. They've got a force structure there. And you're in the submarine base. And probably Royal Navy submarines operating from there, and that means you've got real issues for the Italians. You have real issues for the Italians in the Adriatic and the Ionian. And you can forget about the Aegean. You really can. So I think Crete will become, rather like Malta, the subject of some very heavy bombing raids. It'd become a focus for enemy forces and enemy air force actions. But I think it basically seals the door on the Axis forces doing anything in the Eastern Mediterranean. Realistically, if you have Crete and Malta, then it's going to be a problem for them to do stuff. As long as you can steadily resupply them. And the fact is, with Malta in the position it's in, it's supported by Crete. And Crete, as long as you have that railway around the island kept working, and as long as you have the ports on the southern side as well as the north you can therefore offload into, you can make your life very easy to resupply. You can go into the southern ports, which are behind the island, behind its defences. Which if anyone wants to attack, they have to go out and go round it. Really interesting thing is if there's enough radar sets set up there. But we'll leave that to one side. Radar sets would be useful. Long range radar would be useful. Does Crete have a similar effect on the war as if Norway hadn't fallen? Probably not. Probably not. Norway falling is a major problem for the Allied war effort. But it is going to have a big impact on the war effort. On the ability of Germany and Italy to mobilise their forces. And Romania, the trouble is about the Romanian fuel supply is, yes, it's not massive. It's a large component of German overall fuel supply, but it's not massive. But it's a very large component of their premium fuel supply. And if you can start taking that out, which is in range of Crete, then that's a problem. And again, the railway and the infrastructure supports this. If you've got a concrete runway, again, that's going to really help matters. You probably will want to have access to multiple runways, though, to launch enough bombers in a raid. I don't think you'd be launching 1,000 bomber raid or anything like that from Crete, but I think a night raid by 120 to 200 bombers launched from Crete to hit those oil fields, that's well within the logistics of being, that you could set up there, that you could sustain there. And realistically, this all comes back to a little bit more investment at the end of World War I. A little bit more investment in infrastructure at the end of World War I, which can then be built on. Because it's kind of like a phrase I keep hearing on the internet recently, which is called debt snowballing. I think someone on the internet has worked out I'm dealing with a massive mortgage at the moment. We'll leave that to one side. But the thing is, yeah, if you've got this sort of the infrastructure snowball builds up, you invested in infrastructure, therefore you can invest in more infrastructure because you've lowered the cost of it. You've lowered the cost of making a decent airfield, lowered the cost of making the, of putting in the fortifications, because you've already got the infrastructure that can allow you to do it. You've lowered the cost of investing in Crete, of growing the Cretan economy, because it's got the infrastructure already to do it. So you're adding on to infrastructure, you're not building it. You're not going to have to build the infrastructure then before you can build it. You've already got the infrastructure, so you can just get straight on to building it. And if Crete doesn't fall, then rather like Malta, with reconnaissance, Crete becomes a very critical bombing point. And realistically, I've got 1,000 kilometres there. 1,000 kilometres of range. The bombing range of things like the Wellington and Lancaster is... hell, it's closer to 2,000 kilometres. Closer to 2,000 kilometres. Which means they can hit a lot of areas. And suddenly also that means they can also hit a lot south of there as well. Suddenly the bombers, they can come and attack the supply depots from a very different angle. I think it would be interesting. And I think it would have a very interesting long-term impact on World War II. I would say by the time, Crete hasn't fallen and if there's been a big battle and the Regia Marina's been as decimated as it probably would have been by the battle, I don't think the Royal Navy would escape unscathed, but I think the Regia Marina would be decimated because they'd be drawn into a position where they'd have to be, whereas the Royal Navy could manoeuvre around it, and that's usually the point. Fleets tend to get decimated when they're fixed in place and the other person's able to manoeuvre to their advantage. And to attack Crete, the Regia Marina would have to be fixed in place. They'd have to. That happens, then that's going to change the formation of the Eastern Fleet. It's going to change what the Royal Navy can do when Force Z comes around. It's going to change a lot of things. It's going to cause a very different build-up scenario. But it also could mean that North Africa ends a lot more quickly. Or rather, the North African campaign gets truncated in terms of geography as the Axis force are no longer able to resupply towards Egypt. They have to pull back and pull back. They might even end up pulling back as far as Tunisia. Because they can't sustain the forces if they are going between Malta and Crete. Because you can sustain that many forces operating from those two combined. And because with Crete you can resupply Malta that much more easily, so you can maintain a higher tempo of operations from there as well. You have maybe a Force K still operating from Malta, and you have what? Force J operating from Crete. And all the submarines. It's just going to add up, and cumulatively, that's the thing about world wars, they're cumulative events. The victory, the little wins, the resources expended, the lost, add up over time. It might not seem much you lose in this battle, but that's going to mean you're going to have less for this battle, which means you can lose more then, and it adds up cumulatively. Losing their airborne forces, not really going to give much of an impact on the rest of the wider war. Losing their fleet in a battle for Crete, that would have a big impact. There again, if they decide not to do an assault, as I strongly suspect they don't do that operation, then for the British, that probably means that Formidable isn't damaged, which probably means there's a carrier available for, especially if Crete is held by the British and held by the Allies, and is able to act as therefore a permanent carrier, an island carrier, then Formidable might well be sent to join Force Z. Have its aircraft restocked as best they can, and it's sent to join Force Z when they're deploying out there. In which case that has a huge impact on Singapore and all the rest of the war over there. In fact, I would say that's a very high likelihood. Because if the Germans aren't making an attack on Crete and Crete is holding, then you can rely on Crete to do the attacks and for the bombers to move in to do the attacks, rather than Formidable having to go and do the operations. It adds up. It all adds up as a cumulative force. So, I'm normally finish these videos off with a question. I'm not going to change now. But the question is going to be a bit of an interesting one, because I know this is an alternate history scenario, and it's a bit for people they're sort of going, okay, that's... Some people like alternate history, some people don't. I like to look at it because I like to look at, why these things are valuable. It's only if you think about what the Allies can do that suddenly the whole operation to take Crete makes sense and makes value from the point of view of the Germans. But raising the cost of taking Crete, as said, to my mind, makes it less and less likely they do it. I haven't really talked much about how this might affect the Eastern Front. I've talked about how it might affect the Royal Navy. They might be able to take... Formidable might well not be damaged on the 26th of May, and so might be available to be deployed. Might have been withdrawn for a refit anyway, a quick refit in India or something, and then deployed with Force Z. There's going to be another carrier available, basically, around Force Z time, and that would mean Formidable would be useful for that. But I haven't touched on the Eastern Front. And I'd like to hear what you think about that. What do you think would happen Eastern Front? What do you think would happen longer term? And possibly in North Africa as well. If the Italians if the Reggio Marina cannot resupply without massive fighting the forces in North Africa, and that collapses, the North African front collapses back to Tunisia, back to a Western Mediterranean basin where they can actually support and sustain it. What does that have an effect on the war, on the wider war effort? And, as I said, Crete on the Eastern Front. What do you think the impact is on that? And that all being said, what else have we got coming up? Oh, it's the Battle of Gravelines next week. That'll be fun. Fighting the Armada. That's a good example in leadership. What to do, and what not to do. Lord Howard Worthington has fun in that one. I've already done a video about him this year, but and I've done a man about the thing about Santa Cruz, but yeah, seems to be sensible to do the Armada itself as well, just as a case study in all the weirdness that some of the leaders involved get up to. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Please, if you like the video, please do like, share, and subscribe. And remember, all these are patron-suggested topics. What we have every sort of month is, for usually a few months down the road, we have a vote. And we first have suggestions, which patrons put in suggestions, and 25 of those, usually at least one from every patron who suggests them, because not all patrons seem to have questions every month. So about 25 will go to the vote. Then there's the vote, and the top 2 get made into lives, and will eventually come out as Saturday Long Patrols. And the numbers 3 and number 4 get made directly into premieres like this for a Saturday. I consider it a pretty cool way of rewarding everyone, and I was saying thank you for their support by doing this, but also I think it's a very good way of getting some interesting questions. Because it's questions which are going to be a video. Questions which are going to be done in depth. I don't know. Love to hear what you think, and love to hear your answer to the question I put earlier. Take care. Thank you for watching. Have a nice evening, afternoon, midday, morning, whatever it is with you. Take care.